Welcome, subscribers and non-subscribers alike, to this week's episode of the Geeky Gamer Podcast. This is our non-fiction podcast that we do every week, Thursdays, exactly at 3 p.m., hosted by Ken and Bill. If you want to do this thing, we have a Patreon. It's Geeky Gamer Podcast. Do that. We need all the support we can get.
Get some art,
some money from you guys, our listeners and watchers. You could also give us a coffee at Dreadlore.
I'm
Music
drinking
by
coffee.
all lowercase letters, Mr. Interrupt. Couchfire Media brings art media production. Trois Replay production brings us
Nothing.
everything else.
Nothing. They don't do anything.
This week we got Michael Anderson. He's a historian and author with a BS in chemical engineering, PhD in information science. We're going to talk complexities of American politics and try to relate them to gaming. He's written America's Counterfeit Democracy, Tribalism, the progressive gene, the conservative gene. Seems like he has all aspects covered. Welcome, Mr. Anderson. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up
Anderson,
in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Are you quoting The Matrix?
Wow. Impressive.
Do you go by Dr. Anderson or what?
No, you don't need to use that. That's a professional title.
Okay.
We're just friends.
We can call you Mike.
Yeah.
What are you drinking, Mike?
Sweet.
Right now?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Oh.
Scotch, maybe later.
Okay.
What kind of scotch do you drink?
Chivas Regal.
Chivas Regal. Now that is a Canadian.
No. No.
Where's it from?
All Scotch comes from Scotland. Can't be made anywhere else.
Yeah.
Chivas Regal is Scotch?
Yeah.
I thought it was a whiskey. What am I thinking of?
Well, it's Scotch whiskey. In Scotland, there is no such thing as regular whiskey. I was there once on vacation. You go into a bar and you say, I said, what drinks do you have? And they say, I'll give you a shot of whiskey, which means Scotch.
Which means
They
Scotch.
don't have anything else.
Which is the best place to be? No, I thought Chivas was, I'm thinking of something. I'm thinking of Crown.
Oh, Crown Royal, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of. Chivas Regal. Okay, sure. Well, I just lost bartender points. Oh, well.
Aww.
I drink Dallimore.
Which is what?
It's
What kind of?
Dallimore. It's a Highland.
You do? Oh, well.
It might be a Speyside, but it's either Highland or Speyside. And Macallan 12.
Yep. I like
Macallan's
that.
good.
I like that too.
Yeah.
I like Glenfiddich too.
Glenfiddich is great. I don't like the Lowland, and I don't like the Islay. Like the peaty stuff is not my jam. But the Highland and the Speyside are.
Well, I'm a plebeian Scotch drinker because Chivas Regal is a blended. It's not a single malt.
Aha.
So I'm not, I'm at the low level. Common
At least
man.
you're not drinking Johnny Walker. That's the main point.
Right.
You're staying away from that. And you're
Or Cutty Sark or Dewar's or whatever.
Just get away
Are
from
you
that.
saying that Johnny Walker is like the Evan Williams of Scotch?
No, I'm saying Johnny Walker is like toilet water. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Evan Williams is drinkable. Johnny
Williams is
Walker
great.
sucks. I'm sure people go on and on about the black label or the green label and whatever. I'm just saying, like, if you have to pay $100 for the bottle to be good, there's something wrong.
My grandpappy loved Johnny Walker.
Well, we would get along. Mike, who are you? Tell us about yourself.
I am an IT guy. I've been doing IT for a few decades, coming out of the engineering degree. Always liked history. Decided at some point that I would start writing about history. I started a blog on ancient history in 2008, which is still going. And then I was always writing about political systems in the ancient world, namely the Romans and Greeks. And I thought, well, I'm going to write about contemporary politics because that's stuff that's happening real time. And so got interested in doing that.
That is a lot. What is the blog?
Mike Anderson's MikeAnderson.biz, B-I-Z.
MikeAnderson.biz.
www. I have an author blog, but I don't write there anymore because I write on Substack.
Yeah, I do Substack as well. I like Substack quite a bit.
Beautiful.
Right on, Mike Anderson's Ancient History blog. Cool. The future has already happened, dude.
It has.
Ken, did you have a question? I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh no, I was just saying it has. The future's already happened.
So the future's already happened. That's the log line. What do you mean?
Well, people don't pay attention to history. It's poorly taught in school. Everybody hates it because all it is names and dates, and there's no context because they try and cram too much content in too small a time period. And not that you could do anything about it, but then people hate history and don't learn it. And the reason it's important is because all the things that are happening today have happened before.
Like what?
And I don't know, rise and fall of civilization, rise and fall of political systems, tyranny, war, all the things that we see. Because, I mean, basically people in the Greeks lived, the height of the Greek civilization was like 450 BC. So that's 2,500 years ago, approximately. People haven't changed genetically since then. So the same drivers that drive people now drove people then, money and power.
Right.
So,
and isn't there like a cycle where it goes from like, you get a king and then it goes to like a senate and then it goes to maybe a democracy and then that fails and then it goes back to a king. Isn't there a cycle of some kind?
Yeah. There was a philosopher named Polybius who created the cycle of governments, which you're talking about.
Yeah. And
it's pretty good because it basically talks about the rise and fall of, the aristocrats. Aristocrats beget kings, and then kings fall, and you have tyranny, and then there's aristocrats that rise again, or there's a democracy that falls into aristocracy that becomes a dictatorship, whatever. So, yes.
Can you describe what information science is and maybe how you use that to write some of your books?
I don't use it at all.
Oh, you don't? So how do you write?
No.
How do you come up with some of your books?
I read political books and articles and write about it.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any sources or resources?
I use the term computer science. You said information science, and the reason I did that is because when I got my PhD, there was no such thing as computer science then. Mm-hmm. I mean, computers. This is back in the dark ages. Computers were mainframes. Sure. And so there was no real programming to learn. Not like the languages that we have now. So basically what I did is I studied information systems and systems analysis and queuing theory and things like that, which have to do with making information systems operate.
Right. There's a lot of data analysis in there, isn't there? Like, is there not a...
Yeah. Well, I mean, the answer to your question is anybody with a PhD has academic training and learns how to gather the resources together to build a paper or a book. So I have to read probably 50 books and 200 articles to write one of my books because I need to have all the information available to make objective judgments about what I'm writing. I try to write from the middle because since the right and left are genetically driven, they're never going to agree, but there's some good and some bad in both. So I want to get to, the real story about what's happening as opposed to being part of a tribe. I think tribalism is worse.
Can you explain how they're genetically different? I definitely have an interest in understanding that a little bit better.
That was my question, man.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, you don't.
But I won't go into great detail, but like 50,000 years ago, man developed adaptations when they left Africa and came north and east into Asia and Europe because their ecosystem changed. They went from the savanna and hot weather to a lot more harsh climates. And so they had to figure out a way to adapt to those climates behaviorally. So, and this goes along with development of personality too. The basic difference between the two groups is the liberals are curious about new things and like to explore. So they were the hunter types in the tribe. Conservatives are status quo people and don't like to hunt typically, but they're more conscientious, so they became the food management people. So at times when the tribe had a lot of food, the conservatives managed the food. At times when there was no food, the liberals went and found food, basically. So, but if you look at, there's been a lot of research done on the differences between them, a lot of questionnaires answered, all that stuff, and I'll make a point on that by saying their brains are different because it's been shown they're different. You hook an MRI up to a conservative and a liberal brain, and you are able to stimulate different parts of the brain by what you tell them to do or questions you ask them. And the conservative pardon.
Oh, I was just I've seen studies about racism and having brain damage when it comes to. Yeah, I've seen studies like that. I definitely want to understand a little bit more. So is there? You're saying that there is a physical difference, a neurological difference between a conservative brain and a liberal brain.
There's areas of the brain in a conservative that are larger than they are in a liberal, and there's other areas of the brain that are larger in a liberal than they are in a conservative, or more developed.
And this is a thing based off of what 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 do you have an article? Do you have any references? I mean, I definitely.
Yeah. I can send you an article.
You have
like I said, they did lab tests and they hooked up MRI. They had subjects in an MRI machine. They could see what part of their brain fires depending on whether you're asking questions that are liberal oriented or conservative oriented.
I don't think that's too contentious of a statement. I mean, it's about thinking.
It's very contentious of a statement, but
kind of.
Why?
But assuming, like, if you are assuming that
it borderlines on
you're not listening.
eugenics. No, go ahead.
It's not contentious unless you're making the assumption that it's saying somebody is smarter than someone else.
Yeah.
Like, literally different thinking is different thinking. That makes sense. But if we're getting to, like, these people are more intelligent or it is genetically different, I think you get into a contentious statement. But just thinking different is not.
Now, are you saying smarter or are you saying just that people are driven based off of...
It has nothing to do with IQ.
It has nothing.
They have different behaviors. Just
what
like
about eugenics? Do you think you could create a human to be conservative? Or liberal? I mean, is that a possibility?
I don't have the answer to that. I mean, there's we're not to the point of doing gene modifications and creating human beings that way. I can tell you that conservative parents, there's like an 80% chance their kids are going to be conservative, and the same with liberal parents. It's like 87%. So there's the genetic components you get from your parents, but then also the environment you grow up in, their friends, your friends, the neighborhood. Maybe it's a conservative neighborhood, so you're playing with other conservatives, whatever. So, and the point that I think I should make is, you're worried about, is there data supporting this? You guys both know this before we even got on this podcast, because all you have to do is observe the fact that the right and left can't get along. They can't get along because both of them think the other's wrong. When they're not wrong, they're just different. They don't think the same.
That's 30 years of divisive commentary. I come from a very conservative background. My family is, from Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is not a liberal area.
Right.
Though some might say that it is, but it's not. It is. It's interesting to me that you would say that. What am I trying to say?
Your liberal brain is.
No, I'm back. Just give me 1 second. So. From what I know, because I've been studying politics since I was very young, there was a division with American politics between right and left on a fundamental stage around the time of Carter, and part of the reason, Republicans went right was because of the moral truth and whatever with Reagan. Whereas Democrats kind of left religion in that era, and it seems like conservatism runs in morality with religious ideals, and liberalism seems to run with more progressive humanist ideals. And what you're saying is that. There is a difference in the structure of the brains between these two sections.
Yep.
There's not, but it doesn't make one genetically superior or inferior.
No, it has no bearing on IQ.
But what would you say as, because he's, one of the reason I like this podcast is Bill is pretty conservative and I am pretty liberal, but we can talk to each other. So yeah. The statement that you said, and we both are from Kentucky. So if we're not able to talk to as a relatively liberal person, if I'm not able to talk to a conservative, I alienate 2/3 of my state.
Right. But there's an awful lot of liberals and conservatives that can't talk together. The problem with the current situation is there are about 20 million hardcore liberals, the progressives, on the extreme left, and another 20 million hardcore conservatives on the right that are carrying the narrative for our country instead of everybody else. So out of 330 million, 40 million are influencing all the talk on the media about tribes. The rest of the people have more moderate views. Obviously, you've got 40 or 50 or 80 million people that are independents. They don't have any ideology that they prefer. They don't care.
And then you have one third of the country that could care less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they have a different size of their brain? Is there like a third option?
No.
No. Okay.
There's you obviously know that on the right and left of center, there are there are conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans close to the center. Those people basically believe the same things.
Right.
So the closer you get to the center, the more people agree on everything.
Bill?
It's interesting. Anytime you bring in, hard science like that to I'm going to use hard science and soft science here. We can argue about those terms. But my idea being hard science is something you can measure. Soft science is something that's harder to measure. Let's just say. Anytime you bring in a hard science like that in the arena of something that is generally arguable, there's a thought of, well, I'll tell you where my mind goes. It goes directly to eugenics and Nazism and stuff like that. Like
Right.
you know, or what is it, phrenology, you know, these sorts of very racist mentality, which it's an attempt to use science, something that is objective, to rationalize something that is not objective. So I think that's the contentious part about, you know, what you're saying. And as we had said before, from what I gather, that's actually not what you're saying, right? It just
No.
could
I'm saying,
sound like.
see, one statement I left out that's germane to what you're talking about is no one knows whether those parts of the brains are bigger because of your politics or your politics is because their parts of the brain are bigger. Maybe conservatives grow a bigger part of the brain that controls conservative ideology. Who knows? You can't prove it one way or the other, or they haven't been able to.
Interesting. So one of our viewers, Sableton V, asks, so why are people with conservative brains located in certain areas versus liberals? So I think we touched on that a little bit, but it's a question for you.
Yeah, I have a chart in one of my books about that. You can make a list of characteristics of people, and based on their opinion about the characteristic, tell whether they're conservative or liberal. Liberals like big cities. Conservatives tend not to like them. Liberals like big cities because there's a lot to do, and they can have new experiences, discover new things, and that's kind of the way they think. Conservatives are more status quo oriented. They don't like big cities as much, so they live suburban lives or rural lives. It's just, and I mean, there's so many other characteristics like that among them.
I
Not the only
love
thing.
living in the country. I'm pretty liberal.
Well,
Maybe I'm an
I think
outlier.
I mean, it's just the answer to Sableton's question.
Sure.
Or it's an answer. But I'm going to agree with Ken a little bit here. Like, there are other factors, right? So in statistics, you know, like you'd mentioned, Mike, the MRI does show us something. There is a difference between liberals and conservative brains, at least whatever percentage that is. I haven't read it. I mean, if it's like a 1% difference and then we're saying it is, right? So there's a statistical element here, as in how different are they, right? That's one. Right. Second, there are mitigating factors. For example, age. Like hippies, you know, the boomers,
those hippies
were extremely liberal. Well, you know, we got climate change for a reason. Okay, like not to say, hey, boomers, but wasn't our fault. And they are the people that are rich and that are running things and are typically the conservatives right now. So there's assets.
Yep, there's a direct correlation between age and conservatism. The older you get, the more conservative you get. If you're liberal to start with, you don't get as conservative, but it's still, you can see it.
Right.
I don't know. I started out watching, when I was a kid, I was watching Rush Limbaugh, like when he had his TV show, like daily. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? And it kind of got me interested in politics. And, you know, there were some things that I definitely connected with. And there were other things I was like, this guy's like insane.
You actually paid attention to what he said. I didn't. See, my dad was very conservative. He loved Rush Limbaugh at first. And so I was like, oh yeah, Rush Limbaugh, as like a, 7-year-old or something. Until I started listening and I was like, I don't even know what's going on. And my dad eventually was like, this guy's crazy.
And then Paul Harvey, I mean, I listened to Paul Harvey growing up. My grandparents were all in on Rush and Paul Harvey, and I spent a lot of time with them, and they were talked about that. So if this is the case, conservatives today versus conservatives, I don't know, pre-2015 are different fundamentally.
Yes.
does conservatism still exist?
Yes. Because
Are
I mean,
the
there's
Democrats conservative? Because that's where I'm kind of feeling, because the policies that they're making, do you feel like because they've moved further to the right that they are the new conservatives, whereas the Trump
like
party,
RFK Jr.
yeah,
RFK Jr. is a 70-year Democrat and part of a huge Democrat family, but he's unhappy with the way the radical left is moving. So he didn't switch parties, but he joined with Trump.
I would love him to just answer a question.
Right.
I couldn't stand listening to that motherfucker. Like,
have you ever
I don't
talked to
even
a
know
lawyer?
much about him. Jesus. I have no opinion of the man. Okay. But I was watching the deposition or whatever of him being questioned. And I was like,
The hearings. Yeah.
I was like, dude needs to be like kicked directly in the shin. Like, answer a fucking question.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he says. They have
zero trust. Zero trust.
It doesn't
Anyone who
matter
talks
what
like
he
that.
says. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Right.
foregone conclusion. It doesn't matter. I mean, when you control more seats, it happens if you want it to happen.
Let me cut to the chase with you guys on conservative versus liberal, because we'll talk about one thing and then that will resolve it in your minds if we can do that.
Go for it.
Sure.
The basic difference between the two, and you can figure out where you guys fit in. The Democrats the left, liberals are very concerned about equality. That is a huge thing to them. That's part of their psyche. They do not like people inequality in our society. That's why all the socialists are on the left, because they would like to change society into one where everybody's equal. Conservatives don't mind a hierarchical meritocracy because they think that's the normal way that human beings organize. There are smart people, there are strong people, there are persuasive people who rise to the top, and those that aren't as good as they are don't rise to the top.
But you say meritocracy. I mean, just to cut you off a little bit.
Sure.
Isn't it nepotism is the meritocracy? Because if you look at Trump's first term, he surrounded his cabinet with his family. Any working environment that I've ever experienced, people get hired through and raises through nepotism more than DEI, from my experience. I know that I'm not all people, but I've worked a lot of jobs and a lot of things, and I don't see meritocracy in America, for one, but I do see a lot of nepotism.
Well, the basic corporate model is a meritocracy, right? I mean, if a small business is very susceptible to what you said, because I've been in a small business before where it was nepotistic, where the owner of the business had his kids working there. But that doesn't happen at IBM. IBM's and those.
Well, let's define nepotism really quick.
Yeah.
So nepotism, the actual definition has to do with, the king's son or the queen's son is the heir. That's not the way it's really used these days. Nepotism it's misused, but the way it is used a lot is your connections, specifically your relationship. So if you're my friend, you get the job. And that has completely nothing to do with your merit.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're talking about.
You guys are absolutely right. Connections mean everything in business and in careers. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you're starting out and you have a mentor that helps bring you along, it's a good thing. But I would submit that
my experience is mentorship is the only way to make it. If you don't have a mentor, you're lost. You might as well forget, because they have the connections. They have the way through the system.
Unless you're a superstar. and they can't avoid your skills, and you have to rise up. But that's unusual.
Well, check it out though. The idea of, so on paper this works. You know, you want someone who is skilled, and who is someone that is skilled? Someone that was mentored, right? Someone that has gone through, you know, the grind. They had the experience, the merit. But that works good on paper, but what actually happens in practice is people gamify it. So to get mentorship, you pay for it, or you yes man it, or you suck some dick, or whatever it is you do. And so it actually just falls on its head. The people that are in charge, granted, I hate authority. I will give that. I'm an angsty son of a bitch.
Sure.
But the people that are in charge, they're not qualified. They just sucked a lot of dick. That's what I'm saying. Of money.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it's not like when we say it's about connections, right? But what does connection mean? That has nothing to do. This is my posit. It has nothing to do with quality of work, with work ethic, with should you. It has nothing to do with that. I think it's about a popularity contest.
I agree. I disagree with you guys partly because I believe that both things are happening. I think that people rise based on their accomplishments and their skill, and other people rise because they are apple polishers and suck-ups. And so that there is a place where people can do that, because I've worked in multiple places where I've seen that. And everybody that works hard is ticked because the people that are lazy and sucking up don't work hard, and they keep their job when they're not working hard or whatever, or they get promoted. So I agree, but I think both things happen.
I don't know a single person. I can't think of, I'm not saying they don't exist. I cannot think of a single person who deserves the authority they have. Not one.
That's
or
true.
In a job.
I'm with you.
Not
I mean, in my
person.
experience, I've worked retail. I've worked, I worked in Hollywood in their system, their fucked up nepotistic system.
We are
I
a
worked
little
food
jaded.
service. I worked retail. The people that worked the hardest didn't get the raises. They never did.
It didn't matter.
It did not matter. It was the people who had the gift of gab, or the people that they thought that they could get something from. If I could get something from you, I'm going to bring you in.
This is also a generational thing too. Not to like say, hey, we're right, you're wrong, or we're both right or something. But there is a thing when it comes to millennials and whatnot. Every generation has their own wars and their fights and their hardships and all these things, right? So we get away from the victim mentality. But there is a difference in the way that specifically America worked back in the day and now. And right now, you have to work hard, of course. If you want to get anything, you have to work hard, or you're given it. But the working hard, my generation, like, no one accomplishes anything. And they work hard. And millennials, a lot of times, we're told, oh, you can't expect to, like, start at the bottom and just get to the top. Because that was kind of the millennial mentality. Why would I work at the bottom? I can do the top. Like, they're not willing to pay their dues. The thing is like, at what point when you're paying your dues and you're looking up and you're like, that motherfucker didn't pay their dues.
Yeah.
And you realize I'm never going to get anywhere unless I figure out how to gamify. How do I get that? It has nothing to do with hard work. And that's what it seems like anyway.
Yeah. If you've ever, when they do dam releases and they have that bubble go down the river and then they close the dam and then it kind of like shuts off. As a Generation Xer, I've been riding the end of that bubble my whole life. I've seen who's going to be successful, and I've seen who's not. I've seen where the millennials aren't going to. It's like they don't have a shot because I got the last position. I got, in the door at the last minute, and now it's all different. it's different than the way it was before. It's certainly because you have a corporatocracy that has consolidated and consolidated and consolidated. I've seen prices lower or wages lower my whole career. I used to make a lot more than I do now. And then, less people, like with things like the Radio Act of 1996, where, all the radio stations got bought up and there was less communication from less different sources. And now that's kind of changed. But still, like, how many different streaming platforms are there? There's a dozen. That's kind of its own thing, but really there's one or two that you can be successful at. Do you have any thoughts on sort of
this is a great
corporatocracy?
Conversation because you guys are forcing me into a mode I'm not usually in. That's good.
Cheers.
What does not kill me makes me stronger. No, but what I agree with you completely. There are generational aspects of this too, because you talk about the emergence of tribalism here that happened over, let's say between 2005 and then really got going when Obama was president, and then anti-Trump, and then whatever. But in the culture wars between the left and right, there were three culture wars. There's one in the 70s, one in the late 80s, and then one in the 2000s. So all of those things make a big difference in our society. There's the fact, why do married couples have to both work now to survive? When I was a kid, you had one car and dad worked and mom didn't, and that was it. I mean, you were fine. So part of it is everything becoming political. Part of it is everything becoming money. And so I largely agree with the points you guys are making.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you would blame Newt Gingrich for that, and maybe starting once you start a thing, it doesn't go away. I don't think it goes away when I don't think it flares up when Obama is and then goes away when Trump is elected. I think just the opposite. I think it's flared up every single time. I think Clinton was actually a very thinner president, but Bush was not. But Bush was actually had good and bad about it. Bush HW was a better president than his son, in a lot of ways, in every way. And then once we broke that wall and social issues and popularity contests make our government work, then that's a slippery slide of we're not actually talking about issues anymore. We're just talking about belief systems or something.
You can't say certain words, certain combinations of words. I mean, people shut you down. Like, you can lose your career real fast.
I can say whatever I want.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Like people have failed to listen. And then you get into that white noise where they can't listen because, it's like talking to someone who's in shock. You're not going to get a straight answer because they can't give it to you. Talking about how brains work. Like, I don't want to get on too much of a high horse here, but because I think I'm just going to preach to the choir. When there's so much static and you just need to be dumb for a little while and not think, which, is that a conspiracy? I don't know. Let's go into history a little bit. Has this happened before? What we're talking about?
Well, if you are speaking of tribalism, because I think that's kind of the center point here, the country's been tribal twice before. Obviously, the Civil War, that's as bad as it gets. And then there's a period after the Civil War that was also tribal. And that was the big boss politician owned the vote. People had to vote standing in front of others who would hand them a ballot and tell them how to vote, or take them to the bar and buy them a drink if they voted a certain way. It was a totally corrupt system. That was
About
the
what-
boss.
About what time?
Boss,
was that?
huh?
About what time period was that?
Right after the Civil War, so let's say 1870 to 1890, basically.
I see. So Industrial Revolution, you know,
Was done.
rise of unions, all that stuff.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And then what broke that?
Politics. Well, first of all, the secret ballot was a huge thing. Because once you had the secret ballot, people couldn't make you vote a certain way because they didn't know how you voted. But there was also a sort of an intellectualization of voting, clubs that talked about public policy and political issues and stuff like that versus just the mob voting. So the middle class got more involved. Those that were more educated got more involved in voting than they had before.
I was watching. I don't get on social media very often anymore, but here and there, you know, people communicate with Instagram through memes, and one of the memes that I watched because it had Carl Sagan on it, and I think it was Carl Sagan's interview with Charlie Rose. I think. He was really sick at the time, but he was talking about this and this idea of, you know, democracy does not work if the population isn't educated. And Jefferson, you know, warned about that. You can't just say, hey, here are these human rights, you know, here are these sanctified whatevers. Like, you also have to have intelligent, educated people, because otherwise you get Pharisees.
Yep, we violate that rule every election because we've got, first of all, 40% of people don't vote at all. And then a fairly large percentage of the 60% that do vote are voting because they were told how to vote.
Right.
The number of voters who have done all the research and formed an opinion based on understanding of the issues and the candidates is very small. That's the problem. That's
the game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that is to gamify something. Like, I mean, like, I took a marketing class, one marketing class. I should have taken more than one, but I didn't. And the whole time I felt dirty. Not to diss people that do marketing, but fuck them.
I mean, because they're being persuaders. They're professional persuaders to talk people into stuff with incomplete information.
Yeah. It's you know, why would you not do that, right? Like, why would you not? And if you can fool people into believing this, I don't know, like the whole idea of going to a rally, I don't even necessarily mean a Trump rally, an anyone rally. Like, what is the purpose of a rally? Well, it's in the name. It's passion. It's not thinking. It's passion. And passion means suffering. Like, it's nothing to do with thinking, right? Like it's all based on that. So,
but it has to do with generating publicity too.
So where do we go from here? One thing about millennials and Gen Zers and Zoomers and whatever you want to call them, we're really good at complaining. So what do? Right? Like, obviously educate yourself. Like, what can we learn from history? What can we do right now to make things better?
Well, let me jump into my fifth book for a minute. The fifth book is America's Counterfeit Democracy, Rule of the Power Elites. And basically the theme of the book is that billionaires control our country. And part of the reason they control our... Huh?
So become a billionaire.
Right.
Continue, sorry.
The thing is, though, the public could have much more impact. They still have the power of the vote. And if the people could organize themselves or educate themselves in a way to use the vote correctly, they could control the government. But they abdicate that now, so the billionaires control it. The billionaires love tribalism because while we fight with ourselves over nothing, bits of ideology, they just run the world. So
it doesn't seem to matter either way. Is
right. Well, that's an interesting thing, because what I didn't think about till I wrote the book, and may or may not be surprising to you guys, but you'd say, well, if there's a billionaire class and the Republicans and Democrats in it, don't they fight with each other? And the answer is no, because their common interests are more important than their party. Their common interest is to enrich themselves.
Well, they definitely do that. I don't know of any poor. Well, I mean, maybe AOC. She is probably one of the least wealthy ones, but I'm sure she's doing better than she was.
Yeah, she was working, waiting tables.
Waitress, right?
She's waiting tables and just happened to.
And I think that's one of potentially her strengths, is because she has a connection with workers. I mean, being a worker, whereas the word salad that I get from Trump is, I don't know what he wants to do because of what he says. I know what he wants to do because I know what his policies are, because I do research and I pay attention to things they print and say, this is what we're going to do. It's not because he says anything, because his whole stick is to throw everything at the dartboard and see what sticks, as far as I can tell. Can you define?
You're not going to get an argument from me.
But is Trumpism, is that conservative? I think I asked this before, but I just wanted to kind of ask it again.
He's not a conservative.
Or is it something else? He's just using that party as a way to further his agenda.
He's using the
make
party.
Money.
He's using the party, but he's a populist.
Yeah,
and he's the
absolutely.
first populist who's ever been elected in our country. And the definition of a populist is somebody who's not the establishment, so they can't be controlled by the establishment. So that's why he appeared, because the middle class, male, non-union, middle class and lower middle class had been neglected by the Democratic Party when they became friends with Silicon Valley. So they had no representation, and they were looking for somebody to represent them, and he appeared at the right time.
You know what that sounds a lot like? Zig Heil. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to say that Trump is Hitler.
I feel like you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to call Trump a fascist or Hitler, because we as of yet, we're just putting migrants. We haven't built the concentration camps yet, but I mean, it might be on the docket. But the thing is who knows what's really going to happen, because that might be what he's saying that he wants to happen. But
big recession,
the real
Sorry.
thing that he wants to happen is he wants to make money. He wants to not go to jail. He
wants a dynasty, man.
He wants a dynasty.
Has he pardoned himself yet?
It doesn't matter.
Is that a thing? Can the president do that?
I think
Yes.
Biden did that.
Well, Biden pardoned his son, and I was like, ooh. I mean,
and the rest of his family.
Yeah, how do you make that decision? So I'm not a father, okay? I think that is an extremely difficult place to be. I'm trying to give Biden a little credit here. I think it is abhorrible that he did that, personally. I want to judge him fast, but it is a tough decision. How do you want your family, Brad?
Rid of affirmative action, kind of.
What do you think, Mike? What do you think about that?
What, the pardons?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the things he did made it look like he's really a crook and he's covering himself for that being exposed. I mean, pardoning his whole family and Hunter. I mean, Hunter's different than his brother and his sister-in-laws and all of those people all got pardoned. And Fauci getting pardoned and all that. It's like, it makes Fauci look like, well, we know he's a crook, so we better pardon him because the Republicans will put him in jail.
I disagree with that. I think we know that Trump is emotionally hurt because of what happened in 2020, and he wants revenge, and I think that's why he pardoned him. I think he should have or not should have? I mean, I don't think it matters. Pardon or no, I think if Trump wants revenge, he's going to take revenge, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
Pardons.
Well, that's. I see where you're going with it. I can accept that statement. I think it does matter, but again, we're getting into just our opinions.
Yeah,
and
it's opinions.
Like Mike said.
Here's the other point, though. If you, do a inquiry on Biden's so-called bribes, where he's bribed by the Ukrainians or whatever, and let's say he's pardoned, you can still expose it without putting him in jail.
Yeah.
So anything, I mean, you can still, Fauci's pardoned, but he's given up his Fifth Amendment rights. So if he's called before a committee, he has to tell the truth.
It's not gonna happen though.
To tell the truth.
Like it doesn't matter because Trump will get his revenge where he gets his revenge, and day one when he solved the Ukraine war and when he figured out Gaza and all of the other things, he's gonna free the Palestinians. Palestine is totally gonna be free of people, for sure.
It's just dripping with sarcasm. It's like a sarcasm cake.
I don't know him well enough to know when he's serious.
Yeah. I mean, Canada state.
Mike, you mentioned your fifth book, which had an interesting title, although I cannot quote it. It's
America's Counterfeit Democracy.
Counterfeit Democracy. So what does it go into there? I mean, obviously the title is to, incite people to want to read it. So
right.
I'm interested. What's the book about?
Well, how many times is the word democracy used every day in our country? I mean, we don't really have a democracy anyway. It's a republic because the founders didn't want a democracy because it couldn't work. But it's fine to call it democracy, and it's moved toward democracy historically. For example, when the people started voting for senators, which was in 1913, before that, the states picked the senators. So it's more democratic than it used to be. But if you accept the fact that the billionaires run the government, then it's not a democracy. It looks like one, smells like one, but it isn't one because the people don't have control. And the billionaires make sure that the people don't have control. They have three methods of operating. They get themselves placed in high positions in government. If you look at all the heads of the departments of the executive branch, attorney general, secretary of state, those are all Ivy League, former consultants, probably elected officials, worked at a corporation, that they all have the same resume, but they're billionaires or have connections to billionaires. They fund elections to make the winners their choices because they put so much money in the election, and they control the lobbyists who influence the votes of the Congress. So they have their money and their fingers in every aspect of the federal government.
So what do we do about that?
Well, I mean, let me ask.
Is it just vote?
Yeah, but I'm being told that by our current, I mean, and this is one of the throwing a million darts at the dartboard, but that we're not going to have to vote anymore. Do you think that's true, or is that just disenfranchising?
No, I don't know where that came from. I don't think he said it. Well, he said
But he
it
absolutely said it. I heard him
kiddingly.
say it. And I like was listening, and he's like,
Yeah, but he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it the way people took it. Like
he
that he
didn't
was
mean
going
it
to
the way I
stay.
heard it.
Well, okay, we're getting into a little bit of bullshit here.
Yeah.
Everybody
okay.
knows that Trump is full of shit, right?
Yeah.
We get it. Like, I mean, for both of you, like, Trump says bullshit. And what does he mean? Who the fuck knows? People argue about it all the time.
Yeah.
Is he ridiculous? Whether you like Trump or not, yes, Trump is ridiculous. He's also the president of the United States twice. You know? So, like, what do we do with it? Like, he said a bunch of bullshit. He thinks Canada should be a state. He's a retard.
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
Panama.
I read his book, and if you read his book, it was published in 1987. You read it, you see how he would be president, because he does that in the book. Does the same. He's a real estate negotiator. So, and his strategy is to either get people to agree to his deal by attrition or by threat. And sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it works.
Well, it seems to be very effective because he can motivate a base like few other people. I mean, we speak the same language. I do not understand half the shit. I can read into some of it. I can totally gleam some shit out of the word salad, but if I don't follow his conservative news network or the Breitbart mixed with One America News mixed with Fox News or whatever, if I don't follow what they're on about, I'm not going to get it, because CNN's not going to have that story and MSN's not going to have that story. But a lot of it's manufactured, and it's certainly cherry-picked, rage-induced outrage. And having worked in corporate news, which I do have a background in corporate news, I remember doing commercials that we would do these packages when I was in LA, and they would send it out to all the different stations, and the stations would have a package with video that they could just plug in their person, but show what we shot. And it was just a way to advertise corporate, whatever they were trying to sell that week.
You aren't implying that the left doesn't do the same thing, are you? Because the left does the same thing.
I'm implying that it's not a left or a right thing. I'm implying that it's a corporate thing.
Yeah.
I think there is there's a massive difference between the left and right on social issues, and I think you even said it before that, or if you hadn't said it, I do my research. You've definitely said in the past that socially you're probably a little bit more accepting, and you're more conservative when it comes to fiscal conservatism, which is something that's over. I mean, that is not the Republican Party today, because we're getting ready to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I expect inflation to be out the door, not just eggs, but or it's just another word salad. We don't know, because we don't know what effects the tariffs are going to have, or whether the tariffs really go into effect, whether they're just bluster. We don't know. But I can bet you that Trump doesn't want to have to deal with a big rise in inflation in the next 2 years, because then he'll lose the Congress. Sure.
I mean, he's got to be responsive to the American people.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not what he's doing right now. He's not doing that. I mean, the Department of Government Efficiency might save the government some money here and there, but I think, blanket cuts to a lot of programs Where is your head on the Department of Government efficiency?
Well, this is the first time in American history any politician has tried to do this. It should be a bipartisan issue, because why should either party think that a bloated bureaucracy is a good thing? And I'm talking about wasting money, not just ideological considerations. So I think it's a good idea. I think every organization, every corporation, even NGOs and foundations and all that, over time get corrupted because they get settled in their ways. They get bigger. They hire expensive executives, and they act like billionaires.
It's the just, government is running like Microsoft.
They need to be cleaned out.
It's Microsoft. What is it? Microsoft Windows?
What about it?
I hate
the government.
Microsoft
the government
Windows.
is like Microsoft Windows. It just has bloatware. But do you think so? Clearly, it's not bipartisan. Musk was kind of handpicked, saying, if you did such a great job with Twitter, that we are going to, have you cut the bloat out of.
Your points would be better if they were not prefaced with sarcasm.
With a couple of private individuals, none of which were actually hired, he might be a special employee, but there's no real accountability for any of this.
What happens to him if he screws up?
What's accountability for U.S. aid? It turns out there's none. You've seen the list of what they funded, right?
I've seen some lists. I've heard some stuff. It's definitely a breaking story that I'm not an expert in, but I do know a little bit about, making blanket cuts across the board, and I only presume that these blanket cuts, they're going to go for the sound bites. They're going to go, or the video clips are going to say, "Oh, we're going to cut it all," and then reality will set in, and they're like, "Oh, we're just going to slice this up a little bit and this and that." They'll cherry pick eventually, because a blanket wiping the table with all of their programs and platforms will hurt American citizens. USAID specifically.
None of the money goes to America. It all goes to foreign countries.
Right. But in that, and Trump's executive order, it was a blanket executive order that he walked back, and a judge found it unconstitutional or whatever, and it's just going to go to the Supreme Court, and who knows what's going to happen, because sometimes the Supreme Court does one thing and sometimes they do another, depending on what their experience is. It's impossible to say.
Mike, you mentioned, because you guys are talking a little bit above my head right now, you'd mentioned this USAID. What was kind of your point on that? Not to dismiss at all what you were saying, Ken. It's just so that I have some more context.
It was funding a lot of what you would call left radical activities that nobody knew about. I mean, it'd be nice if it funded projects that all Americans agreed to fund, except other than one radical faction of the electorate.
Yeah, it was funding HIV stuff for people in South Africa, condoms, things that help health.
Those are legitimate things, but you're leaving out the $500,000 for promoting atheism in Nepal.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how that is really a good thing.
I don't know. I don't know this source because I've been looking into it. I've not heard that, and I would love to get a source for that.
Okay.
I mean, whoa. Then again, Promoting secularism, I think, is okay.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of secularism.
I'm fine with that, actually, but I do think that it sounds a little government, like a manipulation type thing to me.
It sounds like a clickbait article on Breitbart is what it sounds like. Which
I don't know.
if you and I sat down on Breitbart and we went through the articles one by one, Mike, we could easily dismiss half, if not 90%, as being misinformation and clickbait, whereas very few would actually have factual information with sources. I mean, it's very social oriented things, and $500,000 to promote atheism in Nepal sounds like bullshit.
Okay, well, let me give you a few other examples if you got a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
See.
Yeah, is this stuff public knowledge? Can people look it up? Whoa, he's gone.
I feel like he didn't like
I think he just he was trying to find resources and accidentally dropped off.
No, and I think that's fair.
Is it public knowledge?
I mean, I can look it up here. US aid. US aid.
US aid. Because if it's I assume it's a federal
atheism. I'm going to look up spreading atheism. Vance warns that effects abroad.
Just see if they have a list of what they funded the last year.
Yeah, but there's no list. It's too soon. I think that's my point. My point is they don't know because they're just speculating. Like, this is what Trump does. He throws a bunch of shit out there, and half of it's bullshit. 60%, 90% is bullshit.
But we're not disagreeing on that at all.
Yeah.
And we can talk till we're blue in the face about how we dislike Trump. What I'm trying to get at is the US aid stuff. What are they funding? Is there a list of that stuff? Surely there is.
US aid.
If there's not, I think that's a problem.
No, absolutely. And one of the things about government accountability, any government programs, much like the Doge and whatnot, that needs to be.
What is the Doge?
The Department of Efficiency, government efficiency.
I thought you meant Doge like the meme dog.
Yeah.
You should look up Doge and see what it is. It's also a word for marijuana.
Department of Government Efficient, the dog or the whatever, Doge.
Yeah, the Doge.
I think it's the Doge.
I think it's Doge. It's Doge.
But, like, my biggest issue is we're accepting all this fucking information.
He's back. That's all
without
without verification.
We figured you hit the wrong button.
yeah, no. Come back.
We were like, oh no, he's gone. Ah!
I can't talk to two guys and work my computer at the same time.
Sure. No, just post a link in the
chat. Yeah, the GGP guest chat.
And the guest chat, and I'll bring it up.
We started talking about the Doge meme.
Right.
Without you, Mike, we're lost.
Yeah,
we're like a balloon.
We do kind of
just let go into the atmosphere.
we know about a little bit about gaming, but
right.
You've
been gaming me for an hour.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of political podcasts, and I think part of the reason why I like this conversation is that A, nobody's getting mad at each other, but B, like, any of the topics that we're talking about is scary as shit, and so if you can put this kind of content into your role playing game and like use it to scare your players. I mean, that's the thing. You don't have to be this real, but certainly some of the topics are like, corporate, government waste and stuff like that.
I would just love to find solutions, and it's so. What I see, whether we're talking about politics, gaming, literally tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, whatever you're talking about, when it comes to people attempting to create a project or make a project come to fruition. It's a film you're trying to make, it's whatever, is you got to get through this thick layer of fat, which is being jaded, sarcastic, cynical, just pessimism. Because what happens is all this energy is spent bitching and worrying. And this is my generation. 2010, I believe, we had Occupy Wall Street. People don't remember what it was. It is a big deal. It was the first time and the only time that I was like, holy shit, my generation is actually trying to do something. And it's actually it makes sense, right? And then what happened? Nothing. Because they had no direction.
Let me give you guys some advice.
Real quick. I just pulled up the Foreign Affairs House.gov press.
Hold on. Let him. We can hold it in just a second. I want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, good.
I think you guys separate your life from the country. It's important for everybody to do that because
absolutely
you can control your life better than you can control what the government does.
For sure.
And if you have a plan for your life and you're motivated to execute that plan, you can forget about the rest of it. Because the impact of the rest of it on you is like your tax money goes there and a whole bunch of stuff the government does, some of which is good and some of which is bad. But it doesn't really, and I'm not minimizing it. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be confused with trying to live your own life the way you need to live it. And you can't let the inefficiency of the government or billionaires running it or anything like that negatively impact your own life.
Yeah,
because we have very little ability to influence that, and really the only way to do it is through elections, and the elections are rigged. So it's a big mountain to climb.
Hey, but I think you say a lot, and if we pay attention to this stuff and get fucked up about it all the time, it's gonna break our brains and make us insane. Yes. There is definitely you have to deal with the shit that you deal with, and you got to let the shit go that you can't control. That's a real that's a real thing.
Yeah, and the government
that's why we can talk.
Right. Government is the aspect of our lives that we have least control over.
Yeah. So I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee website, and it's kind of written really messed up. It's written the way it's very partisan, even though this is a government website. And I know that they've reset all of the websites under the newest administration, but this says Democrats are unaccountable bureaucrats don't want America to know how their hard-earned tax dollars are being wasted abroad. And this is Chairman Mast that is setting the record straight. So this is a government official that is in the Department of Foreign Affairs, and he's got a list of U.S. aid issues. I don't believe personally a lot of the things that they say because none of this material is sourced, and it's written in a very I could come up with this very thing on ChatGPT in about 10 minutes, but they were $15 million for condoms and Taliban aid, $500,000 to $500,000 to promote atheism, $1 million to boost French-speaking LGBT groups in West and Central Africa, $14 million in cash vouchers for migrants on the southern border through the State Department. Well, that's when we're starting to get into something that is problematic. I think for a lot of people who are trying to migrate to America. Of course, if you talk to somebody who's conservative, they're going to be like, well, you got to bring the best and the brightest over, and we can't just take refugees from other countries who are all criminals and rapists. So I see this list, but it's a list that has no source. So we just have to trust this government office is being accountable to us, but they're really they are the source, but it doesn't. There's no trail. There's no people involved.
I mean,
There's
did you read about the $8 million they gave Politico? Because
2.5 million to build electric vehicles, charging stations in Vietnam, $500 million to help Indonesian coffee companies become climate and gender friendly. I mean, it sounds like bullshit.
But the Politico thing is not bullshit. They gave $8 million to Politico, and the transaction is posted. And I don't know if it's there, but you're overly cynical, because I want to know what evidence you have for all the good things that USAID is doing. How do I know that they're helping people? Where's the documentation? I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen any information on USAID, by USAID, for USAID. It, to me, has clearly been hidden. Like, all of this stuff is hidden, just like the Department of Government Efficiency, where do we even know the young boys' names that are working on, the blanket deletions of these things? It is there is a bloat, and we all know there's a bloat because hammers shouldn't cost $6,000.
I just went to the ER a few times because I hit my elbow. Ken knows all about it.
I do.
And I hit the ER a couple times and saw the bill for Band-Aids. And I was like, oh no. He's like $30 a Band-Aid. He's a good Band-Aid.
But
I mean, it worked.
I guess my comment is that this is very charged language, because it's using non-standard. It's not even consistent in the way that it.
Well, your deal is
that
it's sourced. It's not sourced.
Yeah, it's not sourced. It's not even worth the page it's on. It's just like they're just saying things. It doesn't.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing there.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think anybody's disagreeing. Like, as in what I'm hearing from both of you is there's examples of what USAID has spent, but we can't trust any of it. Right?
Well, there's no context.
So we can't talk about it if we don't trust it.
Yeah, and there's no ground.
It's like talking about the Bible.
It's not a conversation that we can have because there's, it's like, it's gotcha journalism. It's gotcha. We gotcha. And then you're like, what's going on?
Okay. So we can agree.
Yeah.
We can. I don't want to shut you off, but if you're going to say the same thing, finish your thought.
Well, and it's very anti-gay. It's very anti, the very people that they don't like. So there is a reason for it, and it's in the playbook of fascism. It's in the playbook of those people are wrong, and we shouldn't care about them. Those people are migrants. Those people are poor. They don't deserve a chance.
So
I don't know why we have to go into other countries to try to change the culture there. I mean, I don't know how the people that run those countries feel about us messing around with their society.
But all I'm saying is that it's bullshit. I don't agree with you because I've never experienced that. I don't know. It's not a thing that anybody can prove.
You guys are talking about two different things right now. You're talking about
you're talking about the USAID thing, right?
Yeah. I mean,
well, Ken's talking about how let me try to, because I want to pull this back a little bit.
Yeah, do it.
All right. My frustration, which I think is also Ken's, about, for example, this document, this USAID, what is USAID doing, or what has it been doing? Just the entirety of that situation. The issue is that we can't trust any of the documentation because there's no sources. So when we start arguing about it, it's okay, well, they did this and this and this. Well, no, they didn't. Well, didn't you see this, this, and this? Well, no, they didn't. Like, it's up in the air, and it's very charged as well. The way that it's said is not facts. It's said it's buzzwords are used where someone who, go on.
I think we're wasting our time because I agree with what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's what I'm getting at.
What bothers me, though, is that so far I've heard only the right that does wrong stuff and nothing about the left doing wrong stuff. Not one thing.
Yeah,
it's all been about Trump and all that stuff. Nothing about
Trump
Biden.
is
Nothing.
The accountable administration in this moment. You know,
Right,
Obama and Biden.
really,
We could talk for a whole entire episode of where the Democrats have failures. They failed to get elected, so they failed to tell their story to motivate the American people. There was an absolute failure in that they failed to make American people confident that they could run the country.
Well, but that's a bit of I agree with you, Ken, but that's also a bit of a deflection, and you kind of know it.
It is.
Which we can get away from it if we want to have a conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that liberals are wasting money. Right? There are better ways to do things. For example,
that's your comment.
Should we be in Ukraine, dumping money into Ukraine? I've been to Ukraine. I like Ukrainians. I think what's happening in Ukraine fucking blows. That has nothing to do with whether or not the US should solve it. There's a difference between someone dying on the street in front of you and you trying to help them, and someone in Ukraine dying on the street. And should the US government go try to do that? That is a contentious, arguable statement. And the humanism in me says, of course, you want to save people. You should stop bullshit from going down. But the realist in me says, the US is not going to Ukraine to help people. The governments don't do that. Governments do shit for their own interest.
Exactly. Yep.
The reason we're in Ukraine has nothing to do with the rhetoric. Now, I'm not arguing against you, Ken. What I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to highlight an idea. You know, where were we? Where were you? Where were you when Gondor needed? Where were you? Where was the US when Rwanda happened? We made movies about it. You know what? Yeah. Rwanda didn't have oil.
No, nothing. They got nothing.
So we didn't care.
People. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Where were we when we created Saddam Hussein? We manufactured that motherfucker.
Yeah.
So I do agree. There's certain things that, like, there's this rhetoric of, oh yeah, everyone should have healthcare. I believe everyone should have healthcare. However, the implementation, okay. Rant over with.
You believe everyone should have roads and, electricity and, shelter, and food.
But there's a way to do it, right? You don't put the cart before the horse. And the fact is that everything causes suffering. I also think that terrorists are fucking stupid.
Yeah, fuck terrorists.
But that's neither here nor there. Mike, I guess I've been talking a long time. Please, I would love to hear your side of this.
Yeah, let's hear your. Yeah, sorry. I'll mute my mic.
I mean, right. I don't have anything to add. I mean, we talked about, and you bring it up, Bill, that why this is important. You have to separate your life from the politics of your country, and the politics of your country get complicated because getting us involved in another country may or may not be a good idea. I mean, there's the humanitarian side and there's the arrogant side, the control side. You know, we're probably in Ukraine because we want to stop Putin from adventurism. But we're willing to put infinite money in to do that because we don't want to spend any troops there. Because we got to use drones from now on. We're not allowed to use troops because nobody can get killed anymore. So to me, we've spent way too much money there. It's time to get a truce, give them some territory and call it a day. Because it's 150 billion already or something. We have better use for that money.
Well, it's very 1984, and the way that the wars just kind of continue in that area, and back and forth and back and forth. I mean, it wasn't long ago where Ukraine was a part of Russia. But the thing is Ukrainians have built up a sense of nationalism. They care about the borders of their country, and as long as, you know, until they wipe out all the people, it's like if somebody invaded Florida and said, well, you know, we'll keep Florida.
We might give up Florida. We might give up Florida, dude.
I mean, Florida's going to be underwater soon. It doesn't really matter.
That's a pretty rough place. Florida. I'm not sure if we should keep that one. But California, Florida.
You know, it is kind of weird to me how you said there's been a lot of money spent in Ukraine, and you're concerned about that. But I mean, the thing is, we print money, and money doesn't mean anything. I mean, they just keep printing it, and that causes inflation. Yes, but you know, what's another $1 trillion interjected into the atmosphere? Of
well, I'll disagree with you on that, but or if you want fascism, that's exactly what you need to do. We need to be more efficient. That's 100% true. And what that's going to mean, like for example, we've talked a lot about AI on here. Ken's, you know, done a lot of research on it. We've had a lot of guests that are interested in it. As I said, I'm an actor. You know, AI is like my anathema, right? Yeah. And I'm a programmer as well, which AI is great at programming. But there's this element of when a new technology comes along, a new tool, the scene changes. And that is a difficult thing. It's a painful thing. Change is painful. So it needs to be regulated. It needs all these things. It needs to be done in the proper way. But the game has to change. You know, how many examples do we need to give? Right? Like to prove that point. I think it's a fairly moot point, honestly. So what I'm getting at is, how do we get to a point where, is there a historical example of being somewhere like we are in the US socially, and then being at, let's say, a changing point, and it not going to shit? Or does it explode?
You mean like the Industrial Revolution, for example?
Sure.
That's a huge changing point, going from individuals doing labor to mass production. And it went to shit in the sense that it was exploitation. And until people complained enough to slow down the exploitation, it was bad.
This sounds familiar.
I'm a technologist, and AI scares me because the analogy I'll use is gene replacement and eventually creating human beings by genetic modification. You know, being able to order a blonde, you know, woman or something, or smart 150 IQ or something like that. And my analogy with AI is that I don't know how you control something like that, gene modification, because there are always nefarious characters that will cheat and use it. There'll be people with enough money that will order up some kid to be produced. Just like with AI, I don't see how to control it. Because there are people, you know, mafia and gangs and bad people who are going to figure out how to use it to their advantage and exploit other people.
I'm actually more worried about less about mobs and gangs than I am governments.
Yeah. Well, that's the same with social media. Social media is, I mean, the Congress wants to control social media. But to me, there's no way to do that. The only way you can do it is with a dictatorship. Because who's going to make the rules about who gets moderated? You say something, I say something. How does it decide which one or both of us is a legitimate statement versus, disinformation? I don't know how you do that.
Well, usually it's digging and verifying and finding the source, finding the person who is the expert, and people can lie. So I mean, it's very difficult, especially if there's no trail, if there's no paperwork, it's just in the ethereal and then hidden information as well.
What do you guys think about this? Might sound a little non sequitur, but I don't think it is. About Wikipedia these days.
I think Wikipedia is a wonderful way to. It's as good as Google and finding the start of who is at play, but you can't believe any of it. You can't believe anything.
What do you think?
It got radicalized over the last 10 years. I've used it for 20 years, basically, and it got radicalized. I use it as the first entry into some subject.
Right,
And
so you guys agree on that. Okay.
Yeah, and I can't. It's valuable for that. Then I start using real sources after I've done that. But it's a good way to get like a page about what something is. What happened at the Battle of Gettysburg, and you can read about that and go, well, then I got to go. And of course, they have references there too, so you can check their references.
Can you explain how it's been radicalized a little bit?
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you.
The left point of view has been injected into it, basically. Things are more. I can't give you a specific example. Sorry, I'm undocumentable, so yeah. I'd have to find something and send it to you.
But that's kind of what we were talking about before. It's like we can't have a conversation about something that we don't have a ground to have a conversation on. If we use Wikipedia as a source and we find a specific example, it's hard to say any kind of statement without a prepared agenda. Saying this is my argument and this is why I think it's true. It's just opinions. Even when you're there and you watch what's happening right in front of you, you get a group of people, say, who saw a car accident, and they're going to have 6 different stories of who was at fault, maybe depending on where they were at the time.
Let's take another example. Do you think the higher ed in the United States is radicalized to the left?
Well, it's not radicalized. It's certainly left-leaning because of a couple of different reasons. The nature of what it is to educate, and the more people are educated about a subject matter, the more you tend to skew a little bit left. And whereas,
I don't know what you mean by that. How does being educated about something make you move to the left?
Because you have the more knowledge you have, the more you can see and have empathy and connection with other individuals that are beyond yourself. So you get a little introducing to who like people from other countries, people from diverse backgrounds, people from different places, different statuses of economic levels. You get a lot of people from different communities trying to establish a ground and have a conversation. So you have to give and you have to take a little bit. So absolutely. Is the nature of education left-leaning? It certainly is in this country, because the nature of education is socialistic, because you can't afford, unless you do homeschool, to educate your kids. You know, it's a collaborative event.
Well, it didn't used to be radicalized for the left. It used to be more even.
Well, it's not
But all the
radicalized
people-
to the left.
Huh?
It's certainly left leaning, but it's not radicalized to the left. I think the use of radicalization, if it was radicalized to the left, then they're all like, Che, go Che, we're gonna, you know, do a lot of things that are left leaning and create, and that's going to affect the community around them. And I don't think it does. If that was the case, then our country would be a little bit different. For instance, 60% of women are undergraduates right now. 60%. So
Right.
men are falling out of that.
Right.
I think in a lot of part is because men they don't like school. Like I didn't like school growing up, but I stayed in because I was, you know, told that this is the way you further yourself in the world. So it's and yeah, if you get into statistics, depending on if you get into philosophy, there are more left leaning, but it doesn't radicalize anything or anyone, because it clearly, the whole point of education is for you to understand different things. And it makes you, in fact, less radicalized because you know more about a subject. I think you get radicalization when you have tunnel vision and you only have one specific bit of content, one specific. You're limiting your inputs.
How do you explain why conservatives get censored in universities? They can't speak there.
But they don't. They don't get.
No, they get shouted down.
They do not.
The fire alarm.
When was the last time you were on a campus? I mean, if you went to a they're protesters, for instance, with
censored.
But
There's definitely censorship.
But censorship is you get
universities.
expelled when you're, you know, when you're violent to somebody, when you assault somebody.
Violence is also redefined. You can say something and get expelled, and that's considered violence.
Well, if
Which
you're saying
maybe it
something
is.
obscene, if you're being disrespectful.
True. I rolled away for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, a few minutes.
Yeah.
You guys have kept it civil. I appreciate that. I think we can both agree. We all three can agree. There is censorship in universities, right? Like people do get censored.
well, let me give you another example that's more
All
practical.
sense.
Professors getting fired for reasons like one professor got fired because they said there were only two genders. He got fired. There's a case.
Well, it's kind of disrespectful towards people who believe that, you know,
Not
there's more than just an
firing a
X and a Y
tenured
chromosome.
No. I don't agree that's a fireable offense for a
And then-
tenured.
Pour in the bourbon.
Yeah. And then please elaborate, who was this professor that was fired, and how often does this happen? And maybe there were other circumstances involved with it. Maybe they were not playing along with the team in the sense that this was a subject matter that came up repetitively, that they were perhaps preaching to their classes about something that wasn't necessarily the topic that their class was. What unless it's a doctor talking about you know, the anatomy, like why is that relevant?
Why is what relevant? That they got fired for saying there are two genders?
I think you guys are saying opinionated things.
Yeah.
As in, I can see both sides.
Yeah.
And Ken, you know that I kind of side with Mike on this. But I think what we can gain from this, first of all, is cheers.
Wow.
Cheers.
I'm the only one without a drink.
Where's your drink, Mike?
I've been drinking the
Get
whole
that
show.
scotch in here. look, we're not going to get anywhere on this specific hill because you both disagree on this subject, and I think where we can go with it is, what is the real subject about? People should be able to discourse, and I would argue, although maybe I'm wrong, that a place of higher education should be like the battleground for that discourse. So the moment that people are getting, barring violence, like actual violence, barring, being illegal or something along those lines, if people are getting shut down for speaking their minds, whether it's extreme left or extreme right, you got a problem because you're shutting down discourse. So, for example, a professor getting fired, that is a different animal than a student getting
expelled,
butthurt.
Yeah,
it's a different thing. You're dealing with someone's livelihood. I forget the quote. I forget who it is. Says, if you rob a person of, I think they actually said a man, but they mean a person. You rob someone of their job, you rob them of their livelihood. It's tantamount to killing them. So to fire someone for saying something, even if it's a censorable thing to be said, that's a pretty hefty cost. It better be worth it. And to expel someone because of something, even if, I'm going to go even to this, even if what they did while they were drunk was somewhat racist, to expel them, that is, you're murdering them in a way.
They expelled a woman at UK, maybe it was a year or two ago for saying the N-word to another student.
But to two other students. But
and
I'm not trying to defend. I'm not trying to defend that situation.
Right.
But what I am trying to say is there are circumstances. What those two girls were doing was some fucking bullshit. Also, the girl that got expelled was absolutely 3 sheets to the wind. Now, was she a bad person? I don't know. But I do know that there was a good 10, 15 minutes of them egging her on, bullying her, and being drunk, she dropped the N-word and she got expelled. That is fucking bullshit.
Not right.
I'm not saying you should say the N-word or not. I'm not talking about the N-word. I'm saying that kind of crap. Then we start getting into liberals and conservatives. You're never going to win an argument this way. Okay.
Well,
rant concluded.
He's a doctor, and according to the New York Post, and it's kind of wild reading this. My additional responses depends on who you're reading. The New York Post is gonna inflame you and have triggered language. If you read Newsweek, that's gonna have different language because of. We
can't trust these sources. That's one of the big problems.
We can't trust the sources. We're not there. We can't discuss it. We're outside of the ability to say, yeah, I think it's wrong. If I'm a professor and I'll even admit this. I think it's wrong if I get up into my class and I'm like, well, there are 2 sexes. That's gonna be on the test. Deal with it. It's my test. They hired me. Do I think I should get fired? No, not unless it's a lie. Because there's an XX chromosome and an XY chromosome, or something like that. They're
You're right. But you're right. XX and XY.
Yeah, and so yes, but I think there's more nuance to these stories. That there's more. It goes down because that wouldn't happen. I mean, we say a lot of things in college courses and in that world, and I've certainly been on, Bill and I have these conversations because I find it a personal joy getting kicked out of Facebook groups. So, I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's because of that, because they would have a lawsuit on their hands if that's the case.
Well, they might, but
it doesn't say anything about a lawsuit.
So, Mike. I was gone for a moment because I hit the head. How did this conversation start between you two about specifically universities and censorship?
Because we don't have the detail where we were talking about USAID or something, and and was saying how we can't trust our sources or all that. We had that whole discussion. And I said, well, let's take a bigger case. Do you think universities lean left?
Right.
Because I don't think anybody would really say that isn't true.
I'd say it's pretty obvious that universities lean left. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of them, but and in a weird way, they have a conservative nature because they have their way. Specifically, the University of Kentucky, I am an alumni of. That is a state university that's run like a private university. So that's pretty conservative, I'd say.
Yeah, but it's still a liberal. It's still a liberal thing. But if you look at who's picked it up, who cares about this?
Exactly.
The only people that care about this story are people on the right. The left, the left media. It's not even. It doesn't even.
Why would they want to pick it up? They think it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Why would they even report it?
But it's social engineering. There are only Fox News and Daily Mail and
this is the APA, right? Or the Associated Press, the APA.
Yeah. It's not.
You're gonna make me find counter examples, which I'll have to go do.
Oh, because well, I mean, I can look up what NBC.
Again, it's a bit of a moot point.
Yeah,
both the left and the right news, they don't report on what they don't want to report on, and they report on what they do, and they're likely owned by the same people.
I mean, NBC doesn't cover it. It does not cover it because they don't feel it's an issue. There's no article NBC made. There's no article.
Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, I did.
All right. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Mike,
you guys have a lot of longevity. It must be the alcohol. I've never done a 2-hour podcast before.
Oh yeah. I was about to say we did that once. We're not doing it again. Got about 15 minutes left. What I would like to do is obviously wrap things up, but kind of come to bringing it back home. And it seems like maybe correct me if I'm wrong, a way to do that is the book that you wrote, your 5th book.
Yeah.
First question. The previous 4 books, were they along the same line? Did they sort of connect the dots to this book? Or tell me about them.
First 3 are about right-left differences. The conservative gene is about how conservatives are impacted by their genetics to behave a certain way. The progressive gene is about the left. The 3rd book is Tribalism, which is basically describing the tribal mess we're in that started, I don't know, the early aughts or something like that, or 97 or whatever you want to say.
I think that's way too late.
Rampant, and it's divided our country, and it's a bad thing. Wish we could get rid of it. The 4th book is about the left's gradual takeover of our institutions, mainly the universities, then the traditional media, and social media. So, but social media was left always to start because it's run by Silicon Valley, and people are very left in Silicon Valley. So, but the subtitle of the 4th book is Without Moral Balance, Our Republic Will Fall, just meaning we have to have points of view that represent both sides for people to hear. Because people make better decisions if they hear both sides rather than just one side. There's already enough people who are in a tribe because they don't want to think. People should be thinking about the issues and making their own decisions about how they feel about them rather than using someone else's view and making it their own.
But
Fair.
I mean, clearly the left doesn't cover all of the stories. They didn't cover the law professor. There's a lot of triggering and aggravated with right-wing media. There's a lot of triggering and right-wing clickbait kind of stuff that they create to motivate their base that isn't necessarily based in any kind of reality. I would say that the left does that too, but they do that mostly about Trump because they can't see beyond him right now because they don't know how to process beyond him. I think that's where they fail.
Well, they're in that tribalism idea.
Yeah,
they're still trying to
fail. But they're both tribes. The media on both sides are tribal.
What were you saying, Mike?
Right, except that there's one right wing media, basically Fox, and there's 8 on the left.
Well, that's not true. I mean, there's One American News. There's Breitbart. There's a ton of right-wing media. Right-wing media has more viewership than left-wing media at this point for a myriad of reasons, but not that I think it's a bad thing, but the viewership, the people are watching and believing.
They have one narrative, though, right? See, I think that's Mike. Tell me if this is in line with what you're saying. The finer points are not really important here. It's the right wing has a narrative. The left wing is like a hydra. It just fights with itself.
Yeah.
Mike, is that where you're going?
Where do you read Breitbart? On their website?
I don't.
Is there a broadcast network for Breitbart?
Breitbart is one of the few.
I know what it is.
Yeah, they have access where I think they kicked out the New York Times from press briefings. If you don't read Breitbart, then you have no idea what conservatives are talking about because they hit all of the buttons.
Where do you read it?
You read it on the internet, just on a web page. They're like print or whatever.
Right, but I'm talking about broadcast media only.
Yeah. Broadcast media, One American News. What is the other one? There's OANN. That's One American News. There's Newsmax, Fox News. So those are the big 3. They're all on streaming.
And there are 8 on the left.
There aren't 8 on the left.
NPR, MSNBC, CNN, the 3 major networks are all leaning left. Some lean, like NBC's obviously to the left of.
Yeah, MSNBC is certainly left leaning for sure. CNN, I think, is just center left, and has definitely gone more to the right in the last 3 weeks. So there's excitement.
You made a good point that's worth elaborating on, and that is that Trump has caused a reaction among the media that no politician has ever caused before.
Right.
Because he has so many adversaries, or adversaries for a variety of reasons. They don't think he's competent, or they think he's a bully, or whatever it might be. And he's always the focus of all the attacks.
And I think that was a failure. I think that's in part why the left media is not successful, because people tuned out. But that's the, what is it? The populism argument. I mean, that's why people are going to Newsmax and One American News. I mean, One American News had the January 6th riots. I think it was CNN was going to their source. They were on the ground there at that time when January 6th happened. I'm not. If you look at the viewership, and you're talking about broadcast cable, right. The thing is that nobody cares about broadcast anymore. Like, nobody cares. They don't. They have a small. Right. They have a very small audience, and they're done. I mean, if you don't stream it, people are disenfranchised. They don't care. It's not something that people look out for. It is we are in a post news world, for that matter. And what works is the memes. It's Facebook. It's Meta is like number one in news manufacturing and fake news. It's Twitter, the right wing. Everybody gets the voice, but because Musk's viewpoints are the way they are, he's got a set of people who are getting promoted, and it's not left-wing voices. So I disagree with the argument that it's the left media versus the right media. It's clickbait versus, reality. That's the argument that I think that we need to have. If you're just gonna say whatever you're gonna say, that's lying.
You mean on the internet?
On the internet, it's lying.
Right, yeah.
Lying has more powerful and more reach than any kind of source or reality, and you can't add all these viewpoints to it and expect anybody to believe you. If it is even just the slightest bit one way or another, I ignore it. It is not valuable.
Actually, you can expect 90% of the people to believe you if you had no sources.
Yeah, I mean, just say whatever you want. There's no reason to have a source. You just, and that's the problem.
We're talking about
that
like
we're
the
facing.
actual critically thinking people that are attempting to critically think. The chat, Sableton says, to make a broad generalization isn't the tendency of human knowledge and science since the Renaissance. Sorry. Let me reread this. I can read. I did well. To make a broad generalization isn't the tendency of human knowledge and science since the Renaissance towards some combination of liberal and socialist thought. That would be why universities lean left. Serious intellectual conservative right-wing thought is mostly confined to a few areas.
Yeah, like the Heritage Foundation. There are definitely a lot of right-wing think tanks that will create media.
I see where I screwed up. There's a punctuation. Sorry, Sableton, I suck, but you also didn't capitalize isn't. To make a broad generalization, isn't the tendency of human knowledge and science since the Renaissance towards some combination of liberal and socialist thought? There we go. That's it.
Well, there were no liberals and conservatives that were political before the Enlightenment, because there was no politics before the Enlightenment. There was no voting. There were no parties.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly on point with a lot of the content that you've written. Things have gotten into, you would call it extremes. I think the left has extremism on there, but the 3%ers are more extremer than Antifa, no matter what. That's just reality. It's not my position. It's like when you are violent hate group who doesn't want anybody except for white people in your group.
You're not talking about conservatives. You're talking about MAGA people.
Yeah, but that's alt-right, and I mean MAGA is a circus. So
right. There's a difference. So.
And unfortunately, there's some people in MAGA that are very bad people. I mean, if they're alt-right or neo-Nazis in it, that's bad.
Right. And it's all lumped together, just like the meme of, the wild-haired whomever person screaming and bawling in front of a liberal who isn't thinking. It's almost like mascots. So what's the mascot for the conservatives? What's the mascot for the liberals? And so anytime we say anything, it's just immediately lumped into this, and this fight begins, and this fight's exactly the same.
But it's intellectualism versus violence.
What were you saying, Mike?
Go ahead.
I need to make one other point that it needs to be clarified. The difference between political ideology and political parties. The political parties are the Democrats on the left, and the Democratic Party is a big tent, because it's got socialists and other crazies in it. And the conservatives are on the right, and the independents are in the middle. Agree? Right?
I do.
The
You're taking a
independents are
note.
all over
We're
the
taking a
spectrum.
page
I
from
mean, the
Ken's book.
independents are like literally the independents are all over the spectrum. And I can't say independents are in the middle. I don't believe that libertarians are in the middle. I think they're further right. Absolutely further right.
I buy that. But here's my point. When you look at ideology, the graph is different. You have communists on the left, but you have Nazis on the right. So people tend to think, well, the conservatives are Nazis. They're not. Conservatives are really in the middle, because in the middle is individualism versus collectivism.
Sure.
So communism and fascism are both collectivist theories.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
And you can't lay the Democrats and Republicans on that grid. I've seen the grid where you've got what
As authoritarian,
authoritarian, and yeah.
It's a way of thinking about it, and it's not one that we normally hear. All right, so we're going on 2.5 hours.
Sure.
We're gonna wrap this up. Mike, or I should say, Ken, do you have any other questions?
I think my biggest concern is that when we're using charged words to segment out specific groups and say it's us against them is like a slippery slope to violence and hate.
I agree.
And we do not need to be like, nepotism is a bigger enemy, in my opinion, than DEI will ever be.
Mike, we give the last words to the guest. So if you want to rebuttal, I mean, you got like 10 minutes to talk if you want. Promote something, a joke, an anecdote.
I'm very glad that you guys invited me. I think this was great, because the most important thing about having opinions is the ability to have them challenged. And so I would rather talk to you guys. I mean, we did some challenges here. We disagree with some things. We're civil. But I would rather have this conversation than a conversation with someone who believed exactly what I do, because that's no test of my beliefs. So I thank you guys for that opportunity.
Absolutely, man. We are very happy to have you on. Where can people find your book and all that stuff?
MikeAndersonsBooks.com is my website. So that's Anderson with an S and books with an S. There are podcasts there. My books are all there. The books can be ordered from there. My Substack is reachable there. So that's a good starting place.
That's a good splash. Awesome. Ken, want to lead us out, sir?
I will. Thank you, Mike Anderson, for being on our podcast today. I love talking to people I don't agree with. It's probably one of my favorite things. And I actually agree with you quite a bit. Geeky Gamer podcast is hosted by Ken and Bill. Please consider our Patreon. That would be great. Geeky Gamer podcast, as well as our coffee. That's spelled KOFI. All lowercase letters. Mr. Interrupt brought us music, as well as Couchfire Media, Art Media Production, Trois Replay Production moderated this.
We don't really know what they do. It's ridiculous, people. We need to get rid of those guys.